Earth, air, fire, water. In part 1, we have encountered earthiness, burial, germination, sprouting from within the soil. In part 2, we have encountered the wind, sometimes gushing at the door, sometimes choking the breath with some artificial incense, sometimes carrying the sound of church bells, and sometimes through the alarming reminder about hurry up please, it's time. We come to part 3 now. It's about fire. What kind of fire? What does it burn? Where does it reside? And how is that connected to the other parts of the poem? Let's find out in today's reading of the third part of Eliot's Wasteland, which is called I had promised you when we were doing the very first part that we're going to encounter some stories. I'm going to tell you stories about mythologies, about legends, and today we are going to start with the story about Gautam Buddha and what is the fire sermon. During the time of Gautam Buddha, there used to be this cult of people who worshipped fire, and their leader was Kashyapa. They had this fire-emitting dangerous dragon. Buddha went to Kashyapa and said that he wanted to stay for the night in the hut where the dragon would come. It was the room where they kept their sacred fire. Kashyapa thought that this is a very holy man, but he is not as holy as me. The serpent would surely kill him. When night came, the dragon arrived. But instead of scorching Buddha away, the dragon itself was destroyed. Next day, it was day of a festival. Kashyapa thought that this person might be holy, but not as holy as me. But he was afraid that if Buddha spoke to his followers, then they would abandon Kashyapa and follow the path of Buddha. But all through the day, Kashyapa noticed that Buddha had not come to the festival at all. At the end of the day, when he asks Buddha, "Why didn't you come to the festival?" Buddha said, "Didn't you want me to stay away from the festival?" Kashyapa thought, this man can read my mind, but he's definitely not as holy as me. And then Buddha told him that he understood that Kashyapa was envious of him. Buddha said, "Is envy holiness?" Hearing this, Kashyapa realized his mistake. And after him, his followers also came and they started to listen to Buddha, who said that everything in us is burning. The eye and forms, the ear and sound, the nose and odors, the tongue and tastes, the body and whatever it touches. Everything is burning. And finally, the mind and thoughts. All these things are basis of contacts, feelings and cravings. Craving is like fire that burns everything. It burns what you crave for and burns the heart that craves. The moment we are aware of our cravings, when we sense that contact, and we can somehow tell ourselves that this is not the way I want to feel. If we can get rid of our cravings, the burning stops, and we can break the link between feeling and craving. In short, he said that getting rid of that connection between craving and your own path, that will lead to the cessation of feelings. That will lead to what he said, nirvana, the moment where being dissolves into nothingness. So let's start the text. Part 3 begins with the description of the river. Since it's England we are looking at, it's the Thames. But as Eliot would definitely depend on his predecessors, he is taking lines bodily from a different writer altogether. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. The nymphs are departed. What is a river's tent? Visualize a river and visualize trees throughout the river banks. Now these trees, they have these overarching branches that touch the top, quite like a tent. During autumn, when the leaves are shed, that canopy, that tent is broken. So we have reached autumn. We had started with spring, and then there was this game of chess where time was running away. And where does time run away to from spring to autumn? If winter comes, can spring be far behind? If spring comes, can winter be far behind? So here we have autumn, and somehow, because I'm so much into Paradise Lost, in book one there is this image of Valambrosa, where the leaves they choke the brook, and they are compared to rebel angels. So autumnal fall of leaves is somehow related to choking the path of water. The nymphs are departed. Again, this is very much a reminder of the lines from Prufrock. He wanted to hear the songs of the sea nymphs, but he drowned because the modern world cannot sustain his fantasy. Now, the word nymph is mythologically associated with these sisters who used to be like these guardian angels who used to be the daughters of various river gods. It was believed that they presided over these water bodies and inspired anybody who drank from them. They, in fact, also were believed to have prophetic or oracular power and could confer upon humans the gift of poetry. But nymphs have departed. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. This line is bodily taken from Spenser's Prothalamion. Now, Prothalamion was like a prenuptial song, a pre-marriage song, which was written to celebrate the engagement of Elizabeth and Catherine Somerset, who were the daughters of the Earl of Somerset. But in the original poem, that is the poem by Spenser, the descriptions were full of optimism with positive vibes. The descriptions were about the beauty of the river in front of the poet. Here, in this poem, we see that the river is not described in a similar way. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. Now, this is a very strange kind of description we have. He is saying that the river does not have these things, which means these things are usually seen as polluting the river during the summer. And what kind of things are these? These are used by men and women who take these fancy cruises on the river Thames, and they have departed. The nymphs are departed. And their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors, departed, have left no addresses. Now, when you go on a cruise and then you leave without exchanging addresses, it means you don't want any lasting commitment. So, all these men and women who were having a very fun time on River Thames, they do not want to continue any kind of relationship. They are not comfortable with the idea of loyalty. So, there is a degradation of status when it comes to nymphs. Degradation of status when it comes to love. By the waters of Leman, I sat down and wept. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames, run softly, for I speak not loud or long. The poet is not capable of offering any long song, any epic anymore. Is he also suffering from the same kind of lack of commitment? By the waters of Leman, I sat down and wept. Leman is a lake in Geneva, Lake Geneva. But this line originally is not about Leman. The Hebrews, when they were exiled from their homeland, then they remembered, they were nostalgic about their homeland, and they sang this beautiful song, which is there in Psalm 137. And it goes like this. By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remember Zion. So they were remembering their homeland, and here we have an expression, by the waters of Leman I sat down and wept. Who is this I? We presume it's Tiresias. What is he weeping about? He is weeping about the past which has failed to continue in its grandeur. But at my back in a cold blast I hear the rattle of the bones and chuckle spread from year to year. A skeleton. The narrator can only think about the curse of mortality that is chasing him, the rattle of bones, the chuckle from year to year. So this line, which is basically an echo of Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress, which is again about a man trying to seduce a woman and trying to convince her, saying that we don't have much time, so let's get together. Marvell's poem about carpe diem, about celebrating craving, is parodied in these lines. A rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank while I was fishing in the dull canal on a winter evening round behind the gas house, musing upon the king my brother's wreck and on the king my father's death before him. The description of the river bank continues. A rat, which is usually, again, a common symbol of decay, of degeneration, gives off an air of despair in a way. There is this man who is sitting beside a river and is fishing. The moment this expression fishing is used, we understand that it's definitely linked to the Fisher King. The very start of this poem, I had discussed about the Fisher King, about the king who was getting weak, and because of his weakness, the entire kingdom was getting affected. So the knights were supposed to go for this holy grail, from which, if the king drank, his health would be restored and the kingdom would be saved. So this was this idea of Fisher King. What Eliot does is he combines the idea of the Fisher King and the legend of the Holy Grail with Shakespeare's expressions which were written in The Tempest. Ferdinand, he speaks in The Tempest like this: "Sitting on a bank, weeping again the king my father's wreck, this music crept by me upon the waters, allaying both their fury and my passion with its sweet air." Here we have a person who calls himself a fisherman. He is talking about his brother, his father, all of whom had succumbed to death. So the idea of mortality as the only reality is established again. White bodies naked on the low damp ground and bones cast in a little low dry garret, rattled by the rat's foot only year to year. But at my back from time to time I hear the sound of horns and motors. Again, a further degradation from Marvell's Time's winged chariot hurrying near. He's talking about motors. Why? Because this is the modern age. The possibility of grandeur is gone. The possibility of grand imagery is gone. And what would these horns and motors do? They would do something very mundane. For instance, they would bring a person called Sweeney to a person called Mrs. Porter. The sound of horns and motors which shall bring Sweeney to Mrs. Porter in the spring. Now, Eliot created this character Sweeney in his earlier poem Sweeney Among the Nightingales. Sweeney is not so likable character. If you ever read the poems where he portrays this Sweeney character, you would notice that he's very insensitive. He doesn't care much about women. In short, he represents the insensitive modern man. Sweeney comes to Mrs. Porter. And obviously they have a kind of a mutual understanding. Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Porter and on her daughter. Who knows, maybe Sweeney had come for Mrs. Porter's daughter. In any case, things are kept very vague. But we understand that this is about a sexual relationship between Sweeney and any of the Porters, either the mother or the daughter, or maybe both, which shows an inherent lack of commitment, a celebration of a craving that Buddha would seriously condemn. Now, if Sweeney is taken from Eliot's own poetry, from where is Mrs. Porter taken? Mrs. Porter is again a character from a popular song that was used to be sung by Australian troops during the First World War. Now, as we know Eliot, he is kind of overdoing allusions here, because he is not just limiting himself to these basic allusions, he is also alluding to John Day. John Day's Parliament of Bees has these lines: when of the sudden listening you shall hear a noise of horns and hunting, which shall bring Acton to Diana in the spring, where all shall see her naked skin. Actaeon, Diana. Remember those stories from Greek mythology? Actaeon, he was a hunter. He went hunting and accidentally he saw Diana. She was taking a bath with her companions. And then Diana was furious. She was the goddess of chastity. So she cursed Actaeon. He turned into a deer and he was hunted down by his own dogs. Here we have Sweeney. So Sweeney is kind of a modern day Actaeon. Mrs. Potter, a modern day Diana. So notice how the degradation is explored here by Eliot. Because instead of bathing in divine waters, what is our modern day Diana doing? They wash their feet in soda water. So a fall in grandeur. Now here I want to mention a special comment that was left by one of my very dear viewers. His name is Kaiden Fox. He had commented elsewhere about the ordeal of the bitter water. It's a biblical reference. It's about a ritual followed by the Jews. If a husband was suspicious of his wife, no proof required, just suspicion, then he would bring his wife to the shaman, to the priest, and he would give her what they used to call sota water. And she had to drink it. If she was really unfaithful, her belly would swell and she would die, which is probably because of a miscarriage she would have. That ritual is obviously now done away with for good. But this sota water is kind of linked with this idea of adultery, relationships which are not sanctioned by religion, sanctioned by society. So Sweeney coming to Mrs. Potter, who is washing her feet in sota water, or that tea is softened to soda water, is definitely a link. Thanks, Kaiden, once again for this wonderful connection that you had made. Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Potter and on her daughter. Io si voit dopo chantando la cupola. Children are singing in the dome, in the cupola. In the poem Parsifal, Paul Verlaine, he writes of the deeds of Percival, who was one of the knights who went in search of the Holy Grail to restore the Fisher King. There, he has to resist all kinds of sexual temptations to make himself eligible to drink from the Holy Grail. The lines cited by Eliot are from the end of the poem, Parsifal, and it actually means, and oh, those children's voices singing in the dome. So, see how low culture has sunken. Just like leaves into the filthy banks of Thames. The river's tent is broken. The protective covering is gone. The culture that Eliot was seeing in front of him was polluted just as the river that he was witnessing. Twit, 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 jug, 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 jug. So rudely forced. The nightingale's song has become only this sound that cannot be interpreted anymore. Sensitivity is gone. Music is gone. What we are left with is this jig, 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 jig. And that gives off the idea of an engine vibrating with lifelessness. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter noon, Mr. Eugenides, the Smyrna merchant, unshaven. So now the focus shifts to another character. This character is called Mr. Eugenides, and he is a merchant. Remember the merchant from the tarot deck? So we will have these characters all popping up throughout the poem, which are listed in Madame Sosostris's spread of cards. Okay, so we have the merchant here. So what is the merchant doing? His name is Mr. Eugenides, and he is unshaven, and he has a pocket full of currants. So he keeps munching these nutty fruits. CIF London documents at side. So he's very official looking person, although he's unshaven, which means he's not looking at his professional best. Asked me in demotic French. So our narrator is standing there. Mr. Eugenides comes and asks him something. And he asks in demotic French, that is colloquial, ordinary French, to luncheon at the Cannon Street Hotel, followed by a weekend at the Metropole. We have assumed that our narrator is male. Mr. Eugenides is definitely a man. So this is probably an invitation for a weekend stay in a hotel where two men engage in a sexual relationship, which is definitely not sanctioned by the Christian code of conduct. Back then, the society was not ready to accept homosexuality. What is Eliot's stand here? He keeps it unclear. But what we do understand is this idea of a weekend at the Metropole is the same idea which he is expressing for the heirs of city directors and the nymphs. They are also spending just a short time together. So homosexual or heterosexual doesn't matter. The modern times has seen love deteriorating into a temporary contact, a temporary celebration of carnality, physicality, nothing more than that, no lasting commitment. Okay? And these two places, Cannon Street Hotel, Metropole, they were notorious in those days as places where men would engage in homosexual activities which were temporary. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits, note the word engine, check, 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 check. So at the end of the day, when evening comes, the human being is waiting like an engine, again dehumanized, like a taxi throbbing, waiting, I, tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives. Old man with wrinkled female breasts can see at the violet hour. Finally, we have the name of Tiresias. But Eliot mentions Tiresias so late. Why? If he is a narrator, he should be kind of mentioned in the beginning. The poem Wasteland runs for 433 lines. What is exactly the middle of the poem? Line number 215 to 218, the place where Tiresias is first mentioned, happens to appear in exactly the middle of the poem. It's as if Tiresias is at the center and all experiences are revolving around him. It's like the wheel of time that Tiresias is able to observe when he stands in the middle. And what does he observe? He says he's a blind man. He says he's throbbing between two lives because on one hand, he knows what it means to be a man and then he knows what it means to be a woman. So he's throbbing between two lives, and just like our Sibyl, who was growing older and older but couldn't die, Tiresias was also not granted eternal youth. So obviously, if he had any female breasts, they would be wrinkled, shrunk. So he can see at the violet hour during the twilight, the evening hour that strives homeward and brings the sailor home from sea. So this is a time of homecoming. So beautiful, isn't it? But it's also a time of not so glorious homecoming of someone else. It's not even a homecoming, it's just a visit. The typist home at tea time. So now we're looking at figure of a woman, and she has come back from office. And what is she doing? Clears her breakfast. So she hadn't left the room in a tidy way. She comes home and then she clears her breakfast, lights her stove and lays out food in tins. She is not preparing any dinner for herself. Her life is measured in coffee spoons, kind of a life where she is eating from the tins, processed food. Out of the window, perilously spread her drying combinations touched by the sun's last rays. Although the verse is grand here, the content is meager. It's talking about her garments drying out in the sun. On the divan are piled at night her bed. The divan, that is a smaller version of a single bed, stockings, slippers, camisoles, and stays. So all her tits and bits of clothings, undergarments are all scattered. So it's a messy room. It's not a clean and proper room. And if she's a typist, then of course she doesn't belong to a very high income group. And then what happens? I, Tiresias, old man with wrinkled dugs. Now he is using words which are very colloquial. Dugs actually stands for breasts. So instead of using a more formal word, he is using a colloquial expression. Perceived the scene. So Tiresias, he is looking at the scene from a kind of third person omniscient narrator point of view and foretold the rest. So by looking at the very setting, Tiresias knows what's going to come. And then Tiresias is telling us the future. And he's telling us in a way as if this is actually happening. I too awaited the expected guest. He, who is the guest who has arrived, the young man carbuncular arrives. So he has all these marks on his face, is not very pleasant to look at. He comes. A small house agent's clerk. So this clerk comes to meet the typist. With one bold stare, one of the low on whom assurance sits as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. So although he is just a clerk, his attitude is that of a millionaire. Now, not just any kind of a millionaire, but a Bradford millionaire. People who got rich during the war at the cost of humanity. Right. The time is now propitious. Time for having a sexual encounter with the typist. So this man can judge that now it's time for me to pounce on her. And what does he do? As he guesses, the meal is ended. She is bored and tired. Look at the expression. Look at the kind of foreplay that he is engaging into. Endeavors to engage her in caresses. I mean, just as a prelude to his action, he tries to set in the mood, but he doesn't have the patience, which still are unreproved if undesired. The woman is least interested. Flushed and decided. He thinks that, okay, you won't be coming into the mood. Who cares? Flushed and decided, he assaults at once. Exploring hands encounter no defense. His vanity requires no response. Now, usually when people engage in sexual encounters, they try to understand how they are affecting the other person. Because if you are in love with somebody, it matters. But this man is definitely not in love with the typist. He doesn't care whether he is providing her with some pleasure or not. Tiresias is looking at the scene. And funnily enough, Tiresias is blind because he had said that women experience greater pleasure in sexual actions. And he was seeing that this woman is not even resisting. She is so indifferent. The idea of pleasure doesn't exist for this woman. And then he's thinking, okay, I'm blind now because I had said something which I clearly see is not happening here. His vanity requires no response and makes a welcome of indifference. The woman is indifferent, unaffected, not showing any response. But this man clearly has come only for his own enjoyment, own satisfaction, and he doesn't require a mutual recognition of passion. And I, Tiresias, have forsuffered all, enacted on this same divan or bed. Tiresias, at this moment, feels in empathy with that woman. And he feels that he is suffering through this. Because we had seen that Eliot is none other than Tiresias. Tiresias is not other than any random person who lives the human life in the modern times. I, who have sat by thieves below the wall and walked among the lowest of the dead. Tiresias is thinking, what have I seen in the past? In Greek literature, we have Tiresias coming now and then. And we have seen, and we have allusions to his prophetic times in ancient Thebes, when he used to stand against the wall and talk about the perish of empires. Allusion to Odyssey Inferno, in both of which Tiresias shows up in the underworld and he helps a brother, both Odysseus and Dante, get out. So, fall in grandeur again. Tiresias, who was assigned these glamorous spots, is now assigned the room of this typist. But is that because this room of the typist has become the lowest circle of hell? He continues to talk about that carbuncular man, bestows one final patronizing kiss because he is clearly satisfied, and gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. When the man leaves, the stairs are not lit up, so he gropes his way, he tries to feel his way as if he's a blind man. So blindness is all pervading. It's not like the typist is the victim and the carbuncular man is the person who's attacking. He himself is blinded. So no matter whether you're attacking or being attacked, you are blinded both ways. Blindness is the only reality. What happens to the typist? She turns and looks a moment in the glass, hardly aware of her departed lover, because she was not at all interested in him. Her brain allows one half-formed thought to pass. Well, now that's done and I'm glad it's over. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again alone. Goldsmith. In the Vicar of Wakefield, there's a song where Goldsmith writes about this woman who is seduced by a man and then abandoned. The situation is very much similar. But look at the fall in grandeur. What is this typist doing? She smooths her hair with automatic hand. Human engine, jug, 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 automatic hand. So human beings are continuously presented as dehumanized objects. Automation. Automatic hand, and puts a record on the gramophone. And then the music was flowing out. So it's very cinematic. The typist is putting a record on the gramophone, the music is coming out, and Tiresias continues to say, "This music crept by me upon the waters." When I was talking about Ferdinand's line in The Tempest, you remember? He used this expression exactly, that the music crept by me. And along the Strand, up Queen Victoria Street. So Tiresias feels that this music of the typist, the music of indifference, the music of I don't care for anything anymore, that is creeping through the entire city. And then he feels sorry for the city. Oh city, city. I can sometimes hear, beside a public bar in Lower Thames Street, the pleasant whining of a mandolin and a clatter and a chatter from within. So he is now talking about random places, random bars and restaurants where fishermen they gather and they enjoy music. Where fishermen lounge at noon, where the walls of Magnus Martyr hold inexplicable splendor of Ionian white and gold. If a world is held together by religious belief, then people will feel connected. This was the idea of Dover Beach, right? Magnus Martyr, a church which is a beautifully decorated one, offers a space to people where they can perfectly enjoy aestheticism, beauty of music. So Tiresias is talking about how people might still be capable of not becoming dehumanized. The river sweats, oil and tar. The barges drift with the turning tide. Red sails, wide, to leeward swing on the heavy spar. The barges wash, drifting logs, down Greenwich Reach past the Isle of Dogs. Suddenly, the lines get creepily short. Richard Wagner, he used to write opera. And in his Ring cycle, there was his last opera, Gotterdammerung. There, the German river Rhine is described. Again, with beautiful imagery. Here, Thames is described. So Eliot is redoing this parallelism. First he had done in the beginning of the Fire Sermon, and now he is doing it again. And he is giving off these images of pollution, of degradation, of despair. The river is sweating. So while human beings are presented as dehumanized objects, the river is presented as a person. Wee la la lia, wa la la, Wee la la lia, walala, li la la. The music continues. And then there is a cutscene. I told you, the Wasteland is very cinematic. Now we see a woman and a man who are enjoying a boat trip on the Thames. And she is none other than Queen Elizabeth I. Elizabeth and Leicester. Beating oars, the stern was formed, a gilded shell, a very beautifully decorated uh, cruise boat, you can say, red and gold, the brisk swell. But the sentences are still short. This is uncanny. The river is still sweating. Rippled both shores, southwest wind carried downstream the peal of bells, white towers, wee la la lia, walala, li la la. Decadra to Philip of Spain wrote a letter. In that, he talked about this incident, and it goes like this. In the afternoon, we were in a barge watching the games on the river. The Queen was alone with Lord Robert, that is the Leicester here. So he is narrating an incident about Queen Elizabeth and her, apparently her lover, Robert, and myself on the poop when they began to talk nonsense and went so far that Lord Robert at last said, as I was on the spot, there was no reason why they should not be married if the Queen pleased. So Robert had proposed to Elizabeth. Elizabeth didn't agree. She never married anybody. It said that she was married to the crown. So another failed relationship here, right? So if part 2 was about the collapse of marital relationship, part 3 is about all those relationships which are out of wedlock, which are not providing any lasting commitment, extramarital, socially unsanctioned affairs, relationships that burn with craving, not with fulfillment. Okay? Trumps and dusty trees, Highbury bore me, Richmond and Kew undid me. Now, is this Elizabeth? It is not clearly mentioned. What we feel is that it is some other random woman talking, and she's talking about her experiences at Highbury, Richmond, Moorgate, at all these places. She had encountered men, but she had never encountered love. So she is saying, Highbury bore me, Richmond and Kew undid me. Sexual connotations here. By Richmond, I raised my knees, supine on the floor of a narrow canoe, not on a grand cruise, but on a narrow canoe, a small boat. Dante describes a figure, Pia Tolomei, who describes where she is from and how she was killed on the orders of her husband. So in that poem, the lines go like this. I'm translating. This appears in Purgatorio, lines 133 to 134 of the 5th canto. Remember me, I who am La Pia, Siena made, Maremma unmade me. So the same kind of line is written here. Highbury bore me, Richmond and Kew undid me. So from the inferno of the typist's room, we are now in the Purgatorio. My feet are at Moorgate and my heart under my feet. When does your heart go under your feet? Either it's in hell, underneath, or you are stamping on your own heart. You are killing your own emotions. After the event, he wept. Event, maybe she's talking about a sexual encounter, just like the encounter we have seen between the carbuncular man and the typist. After the event, he wept. He promised a new start. Like, I won't be this insensitive from tomorrow. We will have a fresh beginning. I made no comment. She is just like that typist. What should I resent? I had never expected anything from life. So why should I resent something? Why should I feel bad about something? I never expected anything good. On Margate Sands, I can connect nothing with nothing. Tiresias is bombarded with these images, and he can connect nothing with nothing. But is this line that simple? Margate Sands was the place where Eliot was recovering from a serious nervous breakdown. He and his wife Vivian, they didn't have a very fruitful marital relationship. And there was this problem created by Bertrand Russell, which I don't want to talk in detail about. You can find that out in Google. So when he was recovering in Margate, he actually drafted this entire part 3 of The Wasteland. And he thought that he would show his wife this whole part, and if she approves, he would go ahead with the publication. It was a period of great strain on their marriage. But when you look at the line and look at this word nothing, you might have a different kind of a revelation. I can connect nothing with nothing, which means I am incapable of connecting anything with anything. But he is not saying anything with anything. He is saying nothing with nothing. I had told you that the final aim of Buddhist philosophy to achieve nothingness, and the images in front of Tiresias, these fragmented images of degraded carnality, physicality, this is also nothing. The typist feels nothing. This woman whose feet are at Moorgate feels nothing. Elizabeth felt nothing. Mr. Eugenides was only interested in one weekend. The nymphs had departed. So there is nothing. And there is nothing of Buddha. Only when Eliot reached the nadir, the lowest point of psychosis, he could finally understand that nothing can be connected to nothing. Once you realize the futility of physicality, of desire, once you showcase it and you study it like he does in this whole part, then you can understand that it's nothing. And therefore, I should not be affected by it. And only then I can achieve the nirvana, the cessation of being, the accomplishment of nothingness. So, on Margate Sands, when he was sitting there, he could connect the experience of the typist to the experience of Elizabeth and Leicester, to the experience of the city directors and the nymphs, to the experience of this woman whose feet are at Moorgate. And he can connect this nothing with that nothing, with this nothing, with that nothing. Because it doesn't matter. You're in the past or in the future. Relationships have degraded, has become nothing. The broken fingernails of dirty hands, fragments of dirty hands carry the legacy of dirt. My people, humble people who expect nothing, because we don't have any expectations anymore. And then we have the music coming in again. La, la, the fragment from We la la lea, we la la, le la la. To Carthage then I came. There is no quotation mark anymore. Someone is talking directly to us. And this is a line from St. Augustine's Confessions. Carthage, a city in modern-day Tunisia, is described by St. Augustine as a cauldron of unholy loves. And in his Confessions, St. Augustine had said how much he was tempted by physical desire. And when he came to Carthage, how he was affected by the city. Carthage was the site of burning, 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 burning. This burning is from our fire sermon. In Carthage, everything was burning. The skin and touch, the eye and sight, the ear and sound, the sense organs and the sensations were consuming him. And this is where Eliot attempts to bring together Christian theology and Buddhist philosophy. Because in both, there is a warning against submission to carnality, submission to physicality. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest. It's straight from book 5 of Confessions, St. Augustine's. He felt that even after taking the divine orders, even after becoming St. Augustine, he is very much tempted by physical desires. And he is doomed somehow that he would burn in hell. And he's scared. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest. Burning. Hellfire. If we are to take Buddha's words, we have to understand that hellfire is not waiting for us after our death. It's there very much already burning us. And the sooner we realize it, the faster we can reach water. Buddha's sermon, St. Augustine's confessions are all linked to this idea of burning, and the desires of physicality. But when that dragon comes to you, Buddha said, you can actually burn that desire down instead of burning yourself. So just like burial is a process of rebirth, burning is also a process of purgation. And what about the game of chess? Only a person who knows how to play chess would understand this. What is the game of chess about? Is it just about moving forward, backward, this way, that way? No. Think about what the pawn does. The pawn advances, reaches the final point. And what happens after that? The pawn becomes the queen. The moment of regeneration. Or it can be anything else too. Whatever you wish. Only you have to endure that whole path. Because the end always promises a new beginning. But do the Buddhists really want a new beginning? They want nothingness. We will see what Eliot wants to tell us when he talks about water. And he doesn't take much time there. It will be a very, very short one when we look into the fourth part in our next video. Till then, keep thinking and don't feel panic, because once we finish the whole poem, it's going to be much clearer. Thank you for staying with me. Do consider subscribing to our channel and share it with your friends. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. See you all very soon.